Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the new credentials that are coming down the pike as of the fall of 2010. I was appointed to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing through LA Unified School District. I spent most of 2007, 2008 going back and forth to Sacramento a couple of times a month, so doing for the commission work. In the fall of 2006, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing selected 25 special educators from the Institutes of Higher Learning and Unified School Districts throughout the state of California to formulate the special education work group. And that included educators as well as specialists in areas of speech and language and areas of blind and deaf, etc., specialists, to look at and review the special education credentials to make recommendations for changes that needed to be made within the credentials for the state of California. And when we were looking at autism, of course, the Commission was looking and recognized that with the increase in autism, with the diagnosis of autism, that we needed to be better prepared, our teachers needed to be better prepared to address the needs of students with autism. And we, as you know, the state of California had not been very responsive. Most of the credentials didn't even look at autism. So there are 6 newly added teaching authorizations were put into place. Prior to these authorizations, teachers had to complete an entire new credential. So ASD, autism spectrum disorder, deaf-blind, emotionally disturbed, traumatic brain injury, orthopedically impaired, and other health impaired. Those 6 newly added teaching authorizations were put into place. These add-on teaching authorizations can be added to an existing special education teaching credential to expand the scope of instruction for current teachers. That is, they just need to take 3 classes to their already existing credential to be able to teach. For example, an autism classroom, in an autism classroom. In other words, if a mild, moderate teacher wants to teach an autism classroom, all she has to do is take, and she has a mild, moderate credential, she just has to take those 3 classes and she can teach in an autism class, which is really going to free up a lot of the school districts for hiring new teachers or teachers into those classrooms, because there's a real problem with getting enough teachers to teach those classrooms in those classrooms. In the past 6 years, there's been a 90% increase in students with autism requiring services, so the districts cannot possibly keep up. The autism authorization, based on recommendations from the work group and input from hundreds of teachers and administrators and parents, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing expedited the methods available for education specialist credentials holders to add expertise in autism and other specialties that were not previously a part of the original credential. And also, every single credential now in the state of California will have an autism authorization. This has never happened ever in the state of California. So this is brand new, starting in 2010. All special education credentials will have an autism authorization, the brand new credentials. So, hallelujah. All right. The CTC endorsed a plan that includes preparation to teach students with ASD across all education specialist credentials. Autism standards have been included in every credential, and that was a major coup for all of us. Can you imagine 25 people sitting, educators, in a room for a full year trying to ferret through all of those standards? It was crazy making. It was hard enough sitting in a room of 10 people, 25 people with all of those opinions going back and forth. It was crazy. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about. We educators are very opinionated people. Anyway, like I said, implementation of these credentials will take place in 2010. Okay, one thing that did happen that was pretty darn exciting is we have a new credential, and that is the Communication Development Teaching Authorization. And this does not take the place of a speech and language specialist. It is a teaching credential, and the focus is on literacy, communication, language development, and pragmatic skills. The credential covers preschool through age 22. It was in response to the fact that we have a lot of kids out there with language, pragmatic issues, and we don't have enough speech and language specialists out there to cover those kids with milder speech-language issues. And so teachers serve students with IEPs to support communication, social interaction skills development, and they may also serve students with language development as a co-teacher in an academic setting. In other words, they come in rather than just teaching a classroom of speech-language kids. They can go in and co-teach with a regular teacher. Okay, thank you.
If I was talking to you 2 years ago, I'd be telling you a very different story than I'm going to be telling you today. I'd be telling you about all of the amazing things that regional centers can do to support people with developmental disabilities from birth to death. Unfortunately, today I'm talking to you about what we do, but I'm also talking to you about what we can't do. And as Harvey and Connie were saying, we need to preserve this. We need to preserve the Lanterman Act, even as it is right now, in order that we have the opportunity to rebuild it at some point. But if it goes away, it will be next to impossible to bring back. So I'm saying that at the very beginning because I really want people to understand how serious the situation we find ourselves in is right now. I've been in the field of autism since the early 70s. I was a teacher and an in-home consultant, and have been at Westside Regional Center for 20 years. So I've watched what has happened in the system, and it's devastating. But I don't think that we can lose hope. I think that if we do lose hope, we will lose something that's really precious in this state. In my conversation with Harvey a few minutes ago, he reminded me that in Texas, there are 100,000 people with developmental disabilities waiting for services. I don't know if you are all aware that in California, there is no waiting list. Even if we can't get everything we want, there's no waiting list for the services that are deemed at this point in time by the legislature to be the most important services. So I'm going to start with the services that the regional centers can continue to provide right now, and then if I have enough time, I'll talk about what we can't do. Unless people would prefer that I start with what we can't do. For children above the age of 3, we are still providing support in the form of what is called behavior intervention. At Westside Regional Center, that includes ABA programs, It also includes other methodologies that support children and families in their homes and fall under the broad category of assisting in the changing of behavior, and at this point those are floor time and RDI methodologies. We have not determined at Westside that we will no longer provide those services. So those services, thankfully for us, are still in place. We're still providing social skills programs for children, and services such as respite and specialized supervision after school are still available. Our adults are still living in as independently as possible. We have a variety of programs that support independent living, or as was earlier stated, interdependent living, which term I really like, because I don't think any of us actually does live independently. There are a variety of work opportunities for our adult clients as well. We are facing an incredible crisis unless we take some really, really giant steps in meeting the needs of people who are becoming adults. We have so many folks becoming adults, and I don't really know what happened to all of us. I think we forgot that all these kids were going to grow up, and that we were going to have some very meaningful opportunities for them to be part of communities, to work, and to be productive in the world. I think the early intervention programs that we begin with really are designed to create opportunities for people and provide skill opportunities and relationship opportunities, so that as people grow older, they are able to be part of their communities. What we can't do any longer is provide social recreation opportunities for adults. That's very unfortunate as far as I'm concerned. We can no longer serve some children from birth to 2 years old. Those children who are considered to be high risk will no longer actually receive services from the regional center. What we will have is more of a case management / referral program for those children that will refer them to community programs and community services. There still is a category, they will be under a category called prevention. That's interesting, isn't it? There is still the early start, and under the early start category, children will continue to receive services through the regional center. The children who qualify for those services are children who have a 50% deficit in one area, or 33% deficit in 2 areas. Over the age of 3, many of the regional centers in California are no longer providing social skills programs. Floor time and RDI methodologies are no longer being supported. Social integration programs are no longer being supported or authorized. Many families are going to hearing over those issues, and in some cases they are prevailing, in other cases the regional center is prevailing. At this point, there's nothing. What's in stone is we have to save $334 million, or we're going to see entitlements even more seriously compromised if it exists at all. That's what we know. And as of several weeks ago, we know that it actually will be more than $334 million. Just a few days ago, the director of Westside, Mike Daniker, was telling me that there's at least another $8 million added to that, and I suspect by the time we get to January, when they're really starting to look at next year's budget, it will be even more than that.